Welcome, everyone, to episode 2 of Talking Talent. We're going to cover consulting in the HR world today, and I get to chat with 2 senior HR professionals that I consider friends and are extremely knowledgeable in the HR consulting space. We dig into their decisions to leave the corporate HR world, what's trending right now, and some hot topics to look out for in the future. Hope you enjoy the episode and hope you'll subscribe. Hey everyone, thank you for joining us for this second episode of Talking Talent, which is very, very excited about doing this. And it's been a little while since we recorded the first one. And again, my goal is to try to have a podcast that's really going to be out every 2 weeks, twice a month, really get on a consistent pace. So really excited to bring you the second episode. Again, I'm your host, Sam McCarthy. I lead the HR practice at Cordia Resources. And I'm joined today by 2 amazing guests and 2 people I've gotten to know pretty well over the past couple years. First of all, joined by Julie Simmons, who's the Managing Director of Human Capital Strategic Consulting. Julie serves on a few different boards as well, is very active in the HR community in the Washington, D.C. metro area, and has worked with me on Cordia's HR Leadership Series webinars and is a friend of the firm. So welcome, Julie. Nice to have you.
Thanks so much. Thrilled to be on this podcast. I think this is my first podcast, so yay.
Very good. Thank you. And Ashley Kelloff. Ashley is a very experienced and seasoned HR leader and executive coach who's led HR and people teams across multiple industries and all over the country. Ashley, thank you for joining as well.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me, Sam.
And Julie and Ashley are here to talk with me today about the world of HR consulting and what that means, what that meant 5 years ago, what that means today, and really what the future holds for it. So again, thank you both for joining. Really looking forward to this conversation. And I know that both of you did not start off when you were in grade school, middle school, high school, with thinking that you were going to be an HR professional. Or maybe you did, but I'd be very surprised. So just a little bit to start us off, what was your first job, something you did as your first job, or what did you want to be when you grew up, and then how did that turn into being an HR professional? So Julie, why don't you go first?
Sure. So first real job. So I started out babysitting, but I don't think that was really, I was probably not really qualified for that as I look back. So I'm equally highly suspicious now when I hire babysitters. But my first real job where I got taxes taken out, the whole 9 yards, I worked at a locally owned and family owned diner. It was in the Pacific Northwest in the mid 1980s. And I was cleaning tables and bussing tables and washing dishes and on a Saturday and Sunday morning. So got up super early. My parents drove me to the restaurant, would drop me off and pick me up in the early afternoon, and learned a lot about customer service and engaging with strangers, if you will, and the value of hard work, and certainly a lot about the food and service industry, which I think even to this day are elements that I pull on in my professional career. But definitely, I think you learn a lot when you're getting feedback from people, and it starts young, sort of the value, the work ethic, the exposure to other personalities and people. This was even, and again, I'm dating myself, I realize this, but some people might get a kick out of it. It was even when smoking was still allowed in restaurants.
Oh,
and so,
wow. Yeah.
And again, it was kind of allowed in the whole restaurant because, how do you keep smoke out of the section? But it was just funny, it's interesting. I look back now and I'm like, wow, that's so interesting. Like that I was, working in a diner, serving people there's this one customer who'd come in, she'd get a cup of coffee and smoke a pack of cigarettes. And that was her every Saturday. And I'm like, all right, Sally, good morning to you. So anyway.
Smoked the whole pack while she was sitting there eating?
Her 1 cup of coffee.
Smoked 20 cigarettes in a sitting. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's crazy.
Anyway.
Ashley, how about you?
Hopefully that gets edited out. So Ashley.
No, that's great.
Well, I think mine was just a natural progression of being a pool rat. I grew up in a neighborhood that was big into swimming. I was big into swimming. So I started off as the front desk clerk, taking when we still had manual cards, membership cards. Do you remember that? And I used to hang it on these hooks. There were $4.99 hooks. I remember just shy of 500 members at the pool. And then I worked my way up to the next job I had was snack bar attendant. And then after that, I became a lifeguard, which was like the coup de grace of the pool and the jobs that you want to have there. An interesting fact is I moved home after 17 years and I'm going back to the same pool. My name is still in the lifeguard station, if you will. And I'm also dating myself. I'm not going to tell you what year that was. But my kids now are swimming on the swim team. I'm excited that they may have their first job at the pool in a few years. So, my experience was also, learning, dealing with customer service. However, unlike Julie, I had been at this pool forever. So I knew a lot of the people and a lot of the backgrounds of the people that I was working with. And some of it is just, maintaining patience while you are, dealing with customers or customer service. So I feel like that's something that we probably both brought to HR. Patience, customer service, and dealing with difficult emotions. In particular, when people get upset about something, right? I'm sure you found that in the diner. There's a lot of people, they're trying to relax at the pool. And it's really just dealing, I think, more with difficult personalities on a daily.
I was going to say, you learn more about how to navigate the dynamics of relationships in these like obscure formative years than you draw upon that your whole career, right? Like you just figure it out, how you observe, how you navigate, how you trial and error.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I was, similarly I worked part-time at a grocery store, and it was like, I was the person who was just very, very minimal thinking being done. I was like putting something on the shelf that came from the back and replenishing, restocking, moving things around. It was like, 10 or 12 hours a week in the summer. And but you're right. All those things in the service world, retail, even though you don't appreciate it back then, in some way prepare you for all these things later in life that are going to be at a magnified. So thank you for sharing that.
You learn a lot from your first jobs. You really do. You learn a lot about yourself and about other people, and it's things that your parents can't necessarily overt you to tell you. So it's nice that there's other ways to get that message across.
Absolutely. Well, let's parlay that into talking about what you're both doing now. And I know one of the, in the world of this broad world of human resources, there's all kinds of different ways that people can contribute in your professional life. And there's I think what people think of in corporate HR is there's a company, you have this many people in the company, and you have someone who's responsible for this big, broad term of human resources within that company. So that's what I think people think of. You do something, you're gonna get in trouble, and you go to HR, right? Or HR does payroll, and HR is the person who is dealing with labor laws, and that's one function of HR. That is like you are the person that somebody goes to within your particular company. I think that is kind of the pretty standard way. Like if I ask my mom, who's in her 70s, what HR is, that's probably what she would say. So now you
don't think she'd say personnel? Because that's what my mom would say. My mom would say personnel, which is like my favorite government, like quasi-government term. Like, and my parents were both government civil service people. So like personnel is like a very,
I think
specific part.
My parents were both teachers, and they didn't grow up in the DC area, especially around a heavy presence of either the government or, government agencies or the military. So I think that's probably, or like workforce management is another term I hear.
Good one.
Labor relations. They're both used to unions being, public school teachers. So, but you both have, and Ashley more recently have made a move into the world of consulting. So Julie, I'll start with you since you've
Yeah.
done this. Now it's I think it's been a little over 10 years, right? If I did my research
Yeah, we're on
correctly,
our
that you
11th year. We started in December 2010. So I think
11th
we're
year.
in our 11th year. Yeah.
So talk to me about what made you decide to do that? What was going on then? And how's your journey been so far?
Sure. And again, I think I guess the one little like nugget of information I would say is like everyone's journey should be authentic to who they are. And so for me, it was really about seeing kind of a gap in the marketplace around quality HR support and services for smaller organizations, so less than 100 employees, often less than 50 employees. They have some of the same dynamic needs around talent management, human resources, human capital planning, yet they're oftentimes they don't have the benefit of the same like larger budgets, so they need fractional HR support. And so once I kind of identified that need in the marketplace, that was really kind of what drew me into the consulting field in and of itself. And so my journey was very much around wanting to work with progressive in the sense of leaning into human resources as a positive, as an additive, as a business advisor. So I love working with organizations, and part of my sort of mission around starting my business was really on-ramping women back into the workforce after they maybe had taken a time off or wanted to sort of ramp down their career and have the ability to be in a fully integrated professional services role, but on a fractional basis. And so
Yeah.
kind of melding all that together was really what was the genesis of HCSC. So that's kind of what my journey was.
Ashley, how about you? And Julie, I'll circle back to that. But Ashley, I know this has just all happened really in the last couple of years since COVID-19 has been a part of our lives.
Yeah, so I left my CHRO position at a law firm in January of 2020, literally right before the pandemic, right? And I was going to take some time off, spend more time with my kids. My main reason for leaving was that I was traveling from Fairfax, Virginia to LA, literally almost every week. And when I wasn't there, I was going up to New York. So I wanted to take some time off with my family. Be careful what you ask for. There's been a good 2 years at home, homeschooling and everything else with the pandemic. But it has allowed me to sort of explore other opportunities, right? And so I hadn't made the decision then that I was leaving corporate HR, right? I just wanted to take a break and sort of see what was out there and what else I might be able to do. But similar to Julie, I think I found that some of these smaller organizations needed more support. And I really thought that's where I might be able to add value, as well as also some of the bigger organizations I worked in can't also always do things agile or quickly or efficiently or progressively. So I sort of also wanted to explore maybe doing more cutting edge HR that maybe didn't fit a bigger organization. And so as I had been interviewing in the pandemic and, talking to people about some of the more corporate traditional positions, I realized that probably that wasn't really an avenue that I was going to continue to pursue anymore. A lot of it was either asset tracing or, doing COVID work, or really looking more at compliance or maybe personnel. It hasn't died yet. We may not use that term anymore, but some of that old school stuff is still there, right? Yep. And so what I really wanted to do was help people more in a more cutting edge, fascinating, interesting, progressive way. And I realized, and I'm late to the game because Julie's been doing this forever, but I realized it's sort of, you have a lot more flexibility at doing your own thing, being an HR consultancy. And there are ways in which you can help people, I think, more substantially doing your own thing.
Yeah.
You bring up sorry, I'm going to pull on one quick thread, Sam.
Yeah.
I think Ashley, you bring up a good point, which is like I think my journey was sort of slightly different, obviously, than yours. And yet there is no timeline. Like it's the timeline that is authentic to who you are. And I think that's the part about, I was just having this conversation with someone who I worked with at former job, who started her business 4 years ago. And she's a former internal HR L&D, learning and development kind of specialist. And she took off into a different direction and is now really deep into team dynamics and team coaching. And she's excited about the fact that she gets to work with the clients who she wants to work with, and how liberating that can be. And so she said, I wish I had done this sooner in my career. And we were having the conversation around the fact that you don't know enough sometimes early on in your career to even be as valuable as a consultant. And so you kind of have to have a journey that is organic and unfolds in the way that it should unfold. So I'm so glad to have you on this side, Ashley. It's great.
Thank you. And I think like podcasts like this help expose the kinds of things that we're doing, right? Like, I would have loved to have listened to people doing their own thing maybe 10 years ago. Maybe it would have changed something, right? Maybe it wouldn't. I was still pretty happy with the journey that I've taken, but in the hindsight, 2020, I'm like, should I have done this a little earlier? But you're right. Everyone
I think the world has evolved. And I think, and Sam, not to cut you off, but like, I think the world has changed so much in the last 2 years that it almost feels like now is the time to be doing some of what we're doing for sure.
And Ashley, you're not going back. You're unless, are you resigned to doing this long term, or are you still up for
I don't
going
know.
back to the corporate world?
I think now that I've started my own business, and I've done executive coaching for a while, but not really full time, sort of on the side. I think now that I've started my own business, I will never let that go. It doesn't mean maybe that I wouldn't go back to corporate, but maybe in a different sort of position, or with a bit more flexibility. I still get the calls. So, I haven't said a final hard no. But I really just love the freedom and actually just being a female business owner. I think is pretty cool.
Absolutely. That's very cool. And Ashley, I'm going to stay with you and to talk about in your, again, in the short time you've done this, it's impossible to do a podcast, a webinar, to write a blog, to do anything right now that doesn't involve COVID-19 and how everything's changed the last couple of years. Like we're going to be talking about this for a long time. It's less of a focus than it was like in April 2020, but it's still it's really upset the HR world, which I think is a good thing. But Ashley, what are some of the things that have changed, and the things that you've worked on the most, some of the initiatives for clients in the past, let's say 6 months to a year? What are some of the trends that you're seeing that are happening right now?
Yeah, well, I'm curious to see if Julie would agree with this, but one of the things I've seen is with, maybe we'll call it the great resignation, the great reset, whatever term you want to employ, has actually brought, I feel like, HR to the forefront, and that we're finally getting the work that we've been advocating for. And maybe some clients would give it to us. We had it in different pockets, in different experiences. But now for me, 100% is full on doing the work that I've always wanted to do in HR, which is supporting people so that they can achieve their best in their work environment, and also bring it home, right? And so that they have a positive experience and they carry that with them everywhere. And, it took a couple years in the pandemic of getting there. Like I said, there's a lot of tracing, HR's in compliance. What's the legal ramifications if, the vaccine, not the vaccine, all of that. And it's not going away, but I finally feel that HR is now getting this great work. We're mental health. How do we recruit and retain people, not just short-term vision, but long-term? How do we make people happier in their roles? How do we bring elements of diversity and inclusion and equity? And I feel like people are really serious now. And it's because I think a lot of people don't have a choice. I mean, employees can pick where they want to go. It's an employee market, I feel like, right now. And finally, I think employers are waking up and listening. And so they're coming to their HR resources. And I finally feel like it's great. We always had a seat at the table, but now we have a seat at the table driving the agenda. Julie and I have been doing this forever. And it's fun to finally, sit down and say, okay, here's the things you really need to do and be taken seriously and have the budget behind it and have like the support. So I would say like the number one thing that I've seen is just people have finally come around to doing great HR work that a lot of people have said that they were doing, but maybe didn't take very seriously, or maybe were doing it in a short term or, smaller budget way. I finally feel like people are recognizing these are the things that need to happen.
Yeah.
I think so too. And I also think, Ashley, so great points. And I completely agree. I think the way that we're getting the talent work done is meeting much more of the employee needs versus the organization's need. I feel like for a long time, it was the organization sort of throwing it down on the employee, like, this is how we're going to do it. And so I feel like the last 2 years has really empowered the employee population to say, hey, this is what culture means to us. This is what engagement means to us. This is how we want, and again, not to make it an us versus them, but I feel like because it is such a talent driven market right now, if you don't take care of your people, there are a lot of other organizations out there right now who will, or they're at least going to do it in a way that translates to a meaningful way for the employees. So I also think that the way that we're managing performance has shifted entirely, at least in some of these organizations, since sort of the onset of COVID. It's no longer, a butts and seats approach. If you're sitting at your desk, you must be working, which again, looking back now, what were we thinking? Why did we allow that fallacy to continue? It's certainly more metrics driven. And so I think figuring out that we're creating efficiencies and effectiveness and how employees can value their contributions in a meaningful way that isn't time bound is kind of blowing, I think, some leaders' minds, but it's working. And the companies and organizations that are embracing that philosophy are going to have some talented people working with them for a long time.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you for both sharing that. It is there's all kinds of trends that are, there's all kinds of trends that are changing and lots of things to keep track of. I've definitely seen just in working with hearing clients talk about what they're looking for, and the words, even though the term strategy gets tossed around and is very broad, what they're looking for when they're bringing in an HR director or a VP or even someone in the C-suite if your company's big enough, they're interviewing candidates in a way that is at least letting them share kind of what their vision is, what they've done in other organizations, what they can bring, as opposed to, Julie, your point of saying, we're kind of force you to be part of the culture we already have, as opposed to what are you bringing from the outside and how are you going to make us better? And the very entrepreneurial leaders of companies who are thinking that way, you're getting better people. It's hard. It's really hard to get out of the mindset of this is the way we've always done it. So we're going to force our new HR director to come in and do it the exact same way. And so you're right. It is really pushing people to think differently. They're writing job descriptions differently. The way they're interviewing is different. And you're right. The people who aren't doing it differently are the ones who you're going to see more constant turnover, and sometimes in a good way are going to reach out to one of you two because they have to be very reactive then with all these things that they fall behind on. So what are some other things that between now and the end of this year or in 2023, we all know some of the really hot topics. What are some of these other things that trends to keep track of this year, and some of the things you think are going to even go into next year?
Yeah, I think, and again, I think Ashley would agree with all of this. I think continuing to focus on the marginalized communities in the workplace. I think that everything that's happened in the last 2 years and even the last 18 months as a society and as a culture, at least in the States, I feel like we're going to need to continue to focus on how we can make workplaces not just say that they're focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, but actually translate that into the day-to-day and really have the conversations that make people feel a little uncomfortable, even if it's in a learning environment, a comfortable space, so that we can all sort of show up as our best, most authentic selves. I think that's one area that will continue to challenge organizations, and we can run from it or lean into it, but it's coming, it's here. So that's one thing I think that is going to continue to be a trend. And I also think the mental health aspect, I really believe that the the last 2 years of post, what we've experienced as a country from a mental health perspective, is we're still unpacking all of that. I mean, even as recently as, yesterday, the FAA is now not mandating masks. And so I'm thinking about all these passengers who were on the plane, who were wearing masks, and then they're in the mid-flight, they're taking masks off. And it just feels like a lot of probably some anxiety for some folks on those planes. And so how does that translate right now back into a workplace? And so I just think that mental health and well-being and mindfulness are things we're going to continue to hear more and more about. And organizations that may not be experts in and of themselves about these concepts, but who can rely on business partners and, healthcare advocacy organizations to help them round out their service offerings for their employees will be received well. And then I think that's going to continue to need to be a focus area. Ashley, what do you think?
I definitely think like flexibility and meeting individuals where they're at. Like, I don't, one of my old bosses had a quote, meet your clients where they're at. But I think it's really going to become meet your employees where they're at, because everybody wants something slightly different. And, with the rise of all these HR technologies, we can be very specific with individuals about what we can offer. Particular programs, particular benefits, flexibility in how they work, where they work, what hours, and then, incorporating that with the other things you've said, like mental health. So if someone has an appointment or if they want to go for a run in the middle of the day, a lot of the cultures that I'm consulting for right now have very flexible cultures. They can't offer the best money in the market, but they're offering a ton of flexibility. So somebody needs to pick their kids up from school, they want to take a break, or they want to work from Hawaii on their second week, there's a lot of just different opportunities, I think, for companies to be flexible and meet their employees where they're at or what they're currently looking for. And I think that's a great retention strategy, right? And I'm sure, Sam, you've seen this in your recruiting with both clients and employees asking for more flexibility on both sides.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I've seen recently the organizations that aren't mandating that you're there on Monday, Tuesday, and Friday, or Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, whatever it is. Whether it's mental, and I don't know what it is, but people do want to see other people. They do want to collaborate. But if you're micromanaging how that's happening, especially if you're interviewing someone to come in and either lead your HR team or be the number two person, if you're not at least asking them what their thoughts are on what's worked for them in the past, you have this job open, you want to hire the best people. If you're coming in and saying, this is what's happening and there's no deviating from it. If you can't make a business case for it, why are you doing it? Or, people do want to go out and about and see other people. There are very few people I've talked to who never want to ever go meet anybody they're working with. There's a specific sector. There's also very few people that want to go into an office and sit there for 40 or 50 or 60 hours a week. Like, people want a little bit of both, right? And we can easily accommodate that. So I think if that is one positive that's come out of the last 2 years, is just how we're looking at flexibility and work-life balance. And Julie, to your point, actually both of you brought this up in terms of benefits, creative ways to have benefits that help improve, give people opportunity to improve their lives through things other than just, hey, we can't pay you at the tip top of the market, but here are these other things that are going to offset that. We're going to be transparent with you, and we're going to try to have you, at least have some flexibility in your life. So really appreciate that. Are there any other tips that each of you have for, either, again, Ashley, somebody who's just getting into this, or Julie, someone who's been doing this for some time? Any tips you have for anybody who's listening who may want to get started doing their own consulting in HR?
So I guess for me, I would say don't be afraid. It's sort of daunting, I feel like, and we're the ones coaching people internally in organizations before we jump ship. So I've encouraged plenty of people to go out on their own. I just maybe was reticent myself. And I think the work comes to your door. I mean, and I think now is the time for HR professionals to really stand up and take charge of their work, because people are asking for these solutions. And I think we have a great future ahead of us in HR to do many of these things that we've been talking about and further the market and further people's lives in a positive way. So I would say, don't be reticent and jump in head first, dive in.
Great advice. I think I love that. I think that's great advice. And I also think figuring out who your find a community of some sort, right? Whether it's like-minded consultants, whether it's Sam, I know you all over at Cordy have been a great sort of partner for me to just kind of bounce ideas off of and keep me sort of tethered into what it's like to be, industry wise. I think there's a lot of connection. And so just figure out your community, whether it's other fellow entrepreneurs, other consultants, other folks who are servicing the market that you're servicing. But I do think there's, it can be a little intimidating. A lot of us who are in the people business are in it because we like to be around people. And it can sometimes feel isolating when you're in it by yourself and your whole team is at your table and it's you at a coffee shop. But so just figure out a way to build that community in a meaningful way that makes sense. And don't be afraid to ask for help. Like, I think at least that's what I found. I mean, obviously there were some pointy elbows at the beginning and you just move around them in the room and find someone else who welcomes you with a virtual hug and helps you to figure it out. Because I think more often than not, when you find someone who is supportive of you and of your vision and your success, I mean, there's plenty of room for all of us, I think. And I think, Ashley, you have that same opinion. So come on in, the water's fine.
Yeah. HR for HR, right?
Yeah.
We also need our own mentors. We need our own coaches. And I think you're right, Julie. Like when I sort of started and was looking maybe for a little validation, like, can I do this? You reach out to the people who have been supportive in the past, and they tend to always be in HR. So I think it is important we help ourselves in our own community.
Yeah. And I think, you each have the personality to be able to be, I think, successful at this, right? Not only technically, but just you can speak about almost anything, HR or otherwise. I think there are others, right, and you're both kind of generalists, right? And that I don't know if Julie, you consider yourself that anymore. I know you have more of a business partner background, and Ashley, you've done a little bit of everything. But at the end of the day, if you're a CHRO, you're a generalist in some capacity, right? I mean, a little bit of everything, but there are people, you're right. I mean, there's people who have a niche in benefits or in comp or in talent acquisition or as a business partner in these different places. And I think that's if you're okay with going down one of those paths, you're limiting yourself maybe on what you can offer potential clients. But if you become an expert in that specific niche, as opposed to making it more broad, that can also be helpful. But it is challenging, and there's a lot of people rethinking what they want to do with their careers and are burnout. Ashley, as you said, are burnout, and the compensation and other benefits you're getting from it aren't worth what you're putting yourself through in order to to make it work. So I really appreciate you both joining me. I couldn't have asked for two better people to have on this second episode. There are going to be more to come, but we're really looking forward. We'll have you guys on again, next year to see what's changed. Ashley, see how you're doing, how much you've grown. And, we'll do a time capsule. And Julie, thank you as always.
Love it. Thank you. Nice to connect.
And we'll make sure that we'll make sure we get your have people to be able to connect with you. And I know you are both very gracious with your time. And if someone has a question about something that comes from this or about consulting in the HR space, we'll make sure they can connect with you on LinkedIn or otherwise. But thank you. Thank you both again. This concludes our second episode of Talking Talent. Again, I'm Sam McCarthy with Cordy Resources, and we will see you next time.